Hello YouTube, right here back again for another, I was about to say Dokkan Battle, I don't know why, DVD video. And today I have a little discussion video going on here. It's just going to be me right now, but I basically want to go over the DVD metas over the years and the metas that I personally got to experience, and basically just talk about what I liked, what I didn't like, was it good, was it bad, and yeah, pretty simple. And we're not gonna go in any particular order. It's just gonna be the metas that I wrote down that I for the most part know I experienced. I may have missed some, but yeah, let's get started. To start off, we're gonna talk about the Ruin Undying meta, and specifically the post Ruin nerf slash buff and the post Undying nerf. Those two in those forms, that's when I started, around the time I started playing. I started playing in around 2019, and this was like the thing at the time, right? Ruin, it's basically the Ruin how it is right now. Basically, if Survivor stops repairing a gen, it regresses at 200% speed. At the time, that's what it was. Now it's, I think, 100%. And then Old Undying, when you cleanse the Hex, it gets transferred to another totem, basically. And I like this meta. I really did. It also goes into something else I kind of want to talk about after I get my thoughts out about this. But I love the interaction between survivors and totems had back then. Nowadays, there's no interaction unless you have like Devour Hope going off or Noed going off. Otherwise, there's no, or Blood Favor. Like, there's been very specific perks that survivors have to cleanse nowadays. But back then, that was a thing. You had to get rid of like Ruin. You had to get rid of Undying. And I liked it. It was such a good interaction between survivors and killers and totems. And it kind of leads into my next point I want to talk about. It's not really a meta, but it's a perk that kind of impacted the game for such a long time. But it was never really like meta, besides like its very early iteration. And that perk is Noed. No one escapes death. That perk, just like Ruin Undying, had such a good interaction between survivors and killers. It was basically, you have to cleanse all 5 totems or die to Noed. You have to cleanse all 5 totems before the final gen pops or die to Noed. And I loved that because it was also that, well, we could cleanse all 5 totems and the killer doesn't have Noed, or just get rid of it prematurely and not even have to worry about Noed. And it was so good to do that. It felt good to do that. And the games where the killer would have Noed and you died to it, it's like, okay, well, we could have cleansed the totems, but we didn't, so it's kind of on us, type of thing. So I loved the interaction between survivors and killers and totems back then, with all the Ruin, Undying, and Noed back then. So I kind of want to include Noed in there just to talk about it. But next up, I want to talk about the Circle of Healing meta. And this is kind of like around the time when Hex Totem started to kind of fizzle out a little bit because of the introduction of boons. And the Circle of Healing meta was so interesting and so divisive. It was divisive because you had one side of the group saying that Circle Healing is fine, which I was kind of a part of. When I ran into it as killer, I didn't really have that many problems with it. I did use it a lot as survivor because I am mostly a solo queue survivor, so having that ability to self-heal myself at any time was very good. Because you gotta remember, back then it was just a straight 100% healing bonus. It was basically we'll make it, but on steroids, and for the whole team basically. And the Circle of Healing went through a lot of changes over the course of its, I guess, history. It went from 100% down to 75%. When that wasn't enough, they bumped it down to 50%. And it stayed at 50% for a long time until it finally got reworked again to what it is now, which is 100%, but you can no longer self-heal. So it's basically we'll make it for the team, but you can't self-heal now. And I feel like it's in a really good state. I feel like people kind of underestimate this perk nowadays. And yeah, it's in a pretty good state, I would say. But back then, it was very, very strong, and people hated this perk. It ran the game for a couple months, I would say. I don't remember how long it took it to get nerfed, but I was fine with this meta. Like I said, had no problems with it on Killer. I used it as Survivor. I had no real issues, but I know people on the higher level definitely complained about this perk and said that it needs to be nerfed and gutted. Boil Over. This one you might not remember if because it was kind of short-lived. Basically, after the meta shakeup, I think it was after the meta shakeup, Boil Over received a rework of a kind, and it basically made hooking you impossible. And it was only like this for about a week, I would say, before they reverted it back to how it was originally. Or not how it was originally, but they tweaked the numbers a little bit. And it was insane. For that week, everybody ran this perk, and nobody was hookable. So basically, it was just people being slugged and bled out because people were trying to abuse this. And it was stupid. It really was. Again, from my experience, I didn't really come across that many people trying to do this. I ran into people using it, but not people, trying to go to these unhookable spots and, make the game on fun. But it was very bad for, like I said, for a short amount of time. Yes, you would still run into people trying to go to, like, I don't know, the top of Ormond, right, to not be hooked, or go to the corners of the map to not be hooked. But nowadays you can't really do that because hook respawns. But yeah, people, it was a nightmare for like that week. But it was very short-lived, I would say. A more recent meta it's kind of also short-lived, but Franklin's and Weave Attunement. This meta was actually fun. I liked it a lot. It was basically Killer hits Survivor, and then they get Aura Reed for the full duration of the match unless Survivors did something about it. And it was nasty. It was very nasty. But at the same time, it had very many counters. You could use Distortion. You could use Off the Record. You could use Object of Obsession. You could just simply pick up and move your item. So, I love this meta because me personally, back at its height, I used Object of Obsession a lot. And I remember one time I got accused of hacking because I was using Object and the killer was using Franklin's Weave Attunement on Oni with also the Aura Reed add-on that he has. And so yeah, I got accused of hacking. It was funny. But I liked it. I know a lot of people didn't like it for how easy it was to get to use, but also because people didn't want to use the counters. They didn't want to pick up the items and move it. They didn't want to use Object or anything like that. But me personally, I had a blast with this meta. I never really went full meta with this on the Killer side. I didn't really use Franklin's and Weave together. I used Weave, but I didn't use Franklin's. Yeah, it was a fun meta. It was kind of short-lived, but and then Weave Attunement got buffed / nerfed, so you kind of still see it a little bit, but not that common. But yeah, pretty fun meta. And you go from a fun meta to a terrible meta. In my opinion, the worst meta that I've experienced since playing this game back in like 2019, and that is the Gen Kick meta. Oh my god, this was horrendous. If you guys don't know, back when they did the meta shakeup, 3 perks came out of that as the unbelievably best perks to use as Killer, and that was Call of Brine, Eruption, and Overcharge. And let me take you back, even before this, I was a Call of Brine enjoyer before this even became a thing. I was defending that perk, saying that perk was actually good. Nobody used the perk. Before the 3-gen cake meta, nobody used Call of Brine. I was. I love that perk. But, yep. Overcharge got a big buff. Eruption got a big buff. And those 3 perks ran the game for 6 to 9 months. It was terrible. Killers would load in, instantly go camp their 3-gen, and literally how it would go is you load in, Killer starts to chase, they hit you, go to their 3-gen, and that's it. They just camp that 3-gen for eternity. And it was so bad. Oh my god, just reliving it was a nightmare, dude. Like, And then especially if you came across a skull merchant doing it. I'm a skull merchant enjoyer, but yes, I can't even defend the fact that there would be skull merchants who still do, by the way, will just go to the 3 gen, throw up a drone, and not do anything. But oh my god, it was so annoying, so terrible, and it lasted, like I said, like 6 to 9 months until they finally addressed Call of Brine, Overcharge, and Eruption. They gutted those perks, and then I think it would still even be a little bit longer before they actually added the anti 3 gen base kit, where you can only kick a gen for a maximum of 8 times, or have a gen regress a maximum of 8 times before you can no longer regress it anymore. So yeah, it's just the fact that the perks had to get gutted, that still wasn't enough. So they actually had to make base kit game changes to finally really address it. And even then, you can still kind of camp a 3 gen with a killer like Singularity. So yeah, it was just bad. It was a bad time. But I persevered and I played consistently during that meta. Yeah, ooh, my god. Next up, we got the Made for This meta, which also lasted a pretty sizable amount of time. And I, again, hot take, enjoyed it. As a survivor, I did use Made for This. And as a killer, going against it, I personally, again, did not encounter that many Made for This. And also, I did not encounter many games where Made for This made the difference, right? So, from my personal experience, it wasn't that bad. I didn't come across the, oh my god, if they didn't have Made for This, they would have freaking, I would have got the down and won the game, you know. I didn't have any of that. So it was fine from me. But I did have moments where I would be using it and be like, yep, I made that because of Made for This, you know. But I do understand how other people came across the perk, how they encountered it, and they said it was a nightmare, and they said it was bad, unhealthy for the game. It was a passive thing that, you know, you couldn't tell was even there, right? So it made people just go insane, right? It gaslit people into thinking, oh, are they cheating? Did they have Made for This? You know, stuff like that. So, but it did get nerfed eventually, and I think it is in a better spot. And also, the main appeal for Made for This for me was the endurance when you heal. I love that aspect of it, and I'm glad that didn't really change in its nerf. Man, Made for This pretty unhealthy perk for the game because it turned people insane. Next up, we have I guess you could say the second chance meta back then with DS, Unbreakable, Adrenaline, Dead Hard, BT. Those 5 perks back then, and I think it was 2019 to like 2021, not really 2019 to 2021, but I think the meta ended in around 2021 because that's when DS received its big sizable nerf when they added the conspicuous actions. And again, I was here for this meta, and back then the staple perks in my build were DS, Adrenaline, and BT. I love those 3 perks. I didn't really use Unbreakable. I haven't really used Unbreakable out like much over the years, I should say. I only really started using it kind of recently because of the Shoulder the Burden. But and even Dead Hard, I didn't really use Dead Hard back then either. Only time I'd really use Dead Hard is if I was using a flashlight, because I love freaking Dead Harding for a flashlight save. That was fun. But Dead Hard and Unbreakable, I personally didn't use that much. But DS, Adrenaline, and BT, oh yeah, these perks ran the game. BT, because if you guys don't know, by Borrow Time BT Bill's perk was basically a requirement back then, because we didn't have base kit Borrow Time back then where you got unhooked and you automatically just got a 10-second endurance. No, that wasn't a thing. Back then, if you got unhooked, you could instantly be downed immediately and be put right back on hook. And that's what we call farming. And it was bad. It was so bad that like it was a requirement to use BT back then. So oh my god, new players, we have current Dead by Daylight is so good. And the people who say that they miss old Dead by Daylight, they just miss the broken stuff. And oh my god. But yeah, the whole second chance meta of DVD, I can't really speak on the killer side because I didn't play that much killer back then. But from the survivor side, yeah, I use DS, adrenaline, and BT a lot. And yeah, it was how should I say, a very simple way to play DBD. Next up, we have a more recent one, which is the Pain-Res Pop Corrupt Grim Embrace. And oh my god, this meta, it was just boring. Boring in a sense of, it really was this every single game until these perks got nerfed. I say these perks, but Grim Embrace and Pain-Res, until those perks got nerfed, it was just those perks for months. And I would not have minded the build, because the build itself in general is good because it encourages hooking. There's 3 perks here, Pop, Pain-Res, and Grim Embrace, that involve hooking survivors. And even more so involves hooking different survivors, right? Grim Embrace and Pain-Res require you to hook different survivors to get value from. Pop, you can hook the same person. But in theory, it's good because it incentivizes hooking. However, there will be people who would just hardcore tonal one person out and then go for different hooks, right? But it's just the fact that it was just every single game that made it so annoying to go against. But otherwise, I think in concept it was not a bad meta. It's just how frequent it was and how just draining it was to come across. Because again, there would be games where I would come across a killer using this and they would, not get any value because they wouldn't get any hooks, right? So I think it was a fine meta. I didn't use the full meta as killer. I would, for context, for killer I only use 1 to 2 general aggression max. So I would use Pop, Pain-Res, but then I wouldn't use Corrupt or Embrace. I would use like a chase perk or an information perk. So I think it was a fine meta. It was just kind of stale and just boring. That's kind of my thoughts on it. Kind of going back before this meta, we have the Pain-Res Deadman Switch meta, the original Pain-Res in Deadman Switch, and I love this meta. This meta was kind of like the first, because if you guys don't know, Pain-Res is kind of like the first general aggression perk after Ruin to really become meta. Or I guess you had Pop, but like Pain-Res was like the new meta general aggression perk that came out with Artist. And again, back then I think it was, what was it, 25 or 30% every single time you hooked. It was stupid. Plus it also showed you the location of the survivors. Plus it made them scream. Plus it made them get off the gen. Old Pain-Res was stupid. And like thinking back on it, like how did that perk survive how long it did? But yeah, old Pain-Res, old Deadman's. I think it was old Deadman's was 45 seconds, and it was on every gen if you let go. So it was kind of stupid. It was a really stupid but also counterable combo, because all you have to do is just let go of the gen. That's why people still to this day let go of a gen that's about to get Pain-Res. But yeah, I didn't mind this meta. I liked it. It was low-key fun. And yeah, I did use the combo, especially a lot on Artist. And again, going against it, I didn't mind it. It was low-key fun. Yeah, not much to say other than this was like the first gen regression meta shakeup for the killer side since like Ruin Pop, right? So it was nice. And then next up and lastly, we have to talk about Buckle Up and For the People. This meta ran the game, dude. I'm talking, I ran into it as Survivor, seeing other people use it on me, use it on other survivors, running into it as killer constantly. This, oh my god, this meta was insane, and it did last for quite a bit. You guys don't know Buckle Up. They buffed Buckle Up to make it to where you, the person who's picking up the survivor, and the person who gets picked up gain endurance whenever they get picked up. So basically, it was like old borrow time, and then also you would combine it with For the People, which would instantly pick up a survivor off of the ground and heal them for a health state. or basically it would heal anyone for a health state. So if you pick them up off the ground, they would go from dying to health, or from dying to injured. And so basically it would make this unwinnable scenario for the killer, where if you did it, well, you can't down the person who picked them up, even though they just fought people and traded health states, because they get endurance, and you can't read down the person who picked them up, who got picked up, because they have endurance. So it literally forced the killer to be in this lose-lose situation where either you have to wait for the endurance out, but then, you know, they can make distance and, you know, escape potentially, because you could do this at endgame, or you just have to hit them, they gain the speed boost, and they gain distance anyways. So it was kind of that situation where it really hurt the lower tier killers, but like the top tier killers like Blight and Nurse and even kind of like Spirit didn't really affect them much, because you could just, you know, hit them as Nurse and then instantly catch up, right? Hit them as Blight, instantly catch up. So it was a very strong meta that ran the game for a long time till it finally got addressed. And it's funny because you can still kind of do this, but you have to use a lot of parts to make it work. If you run Wrangler forever, to give the person who you pick up endurance, and then you run yourself made for this, you kind of have the old combo for people and buckle up. It's funny, but no one wants to talk about that. And yeah, with that, we rambled for about 20 minutes talking about all the metas that I've experienced. Like I said, I could have missed some, but yeah, let me know what you guys think about all the current metas in DBD's history, what you guys experienced, what you loved, what you hated, what was good, what was bad. And yeah, next time I should be uploading videos, should be when 2v8 hits. So I hope you guys enjoy that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.